It started as an ordinary day, quiet, uneventful, the kind you don't give a second thought to. Then came the knock at the door. Standing on my porch was a female police officer, firm and serious, demanding to see my ID. Her presence alone raised questions. Why was she here? What had I done? But her request didn't sit right with me. I wasn't in trouble, and as far as I knew, I hadn't done anything to warrant this visit. I calmly asked why she needed my ID, but her response only added to the tension. It wasn't about the law, it was about my rights, and I wasn't sure what to do next. What happens when you stand your ground, knowing your rights, but face someone with authority who's determined to get what they want? Let's just say things got more interesting from there. As I stood there, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't adding up. The officer didn't seem interested in explaining why she needed my ID. She just kept insisting. "It's routine," she said, her tone sharp, almost dismissive. But routine for what? I wasn't outside causing trouble, hadn't been driving, and there was no reason for anyone to show up at my door like this. My mind started racing. Was this about a misunderstanding? A mistake? Or was it something else entirely? I took a deep breath and calmly asked her again to explain the situation. She gave me a look, a mix of frustration and authority, like she expected me to just hand over my ID without question. But I knew my rights, or at least I thought I did. Standing my ground felt right, but I could feel the tension growing. Why was she really here? And what would happen if I refused? I could feel my heart racing, but I kept my voice steady. "Ma'am, with all due respect, I need to know why you're asking for my ID," I said, trying to remain calm. She crossed her arms and shifted her weight slightly, her eyes narrowing as though measuring me. "We've had some reports in the area," she finally said, her words vague and carefully chosen. "Reports of what?" She didn't say. It felt like she was withholding something, and that only added to the tension. I glanced past her, noticing a police cruiser parked a little too casually down the street. Were there others watching? My mind started playing out all the possibilities, none of them good. A part of me wondered if I was making things worse by not complying, but another part reminded me that this was about principle. Meanwhile, neighbors began peeking out of their windows. I could feel their eyes on me, watching, waiting. The officer's tone grew sharper, her patience clearly thinning. "Sir, I need you to cooperate," she said firmly, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was going on here. Why wouldn't she just tell me what this was about? The uncertainty hung thick in the air, and I knew this was far from over. The officer's stance grew firmer, and her voice took on a tone that left no room for argument. "If you don't cooperate, we'll have to take this further," she said. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. I felt the tension spike, my mind racing through every possible outcome. I wasn't trying to make a scene, but something about this situation felt wrong. Why wasn't she answering my questions? What was she hiding? I glanced back toward the house, wondering if I should step inside and shut the door or stand my ground here on the porch. Either choice felt risky. The neighbors were no longer just watching. They were talking, murmuring among themselves. Every second felt like an eternity as I tried to figure out what to do next. The officer took a small step closer, her hand resting on the radio clipped to her shoulder. The unspoken threat was clear. This could escalate fast. But I knew this moment wasn't just about me. It was about knowing my rights and standing by them. "I'm not refusing to cooperate," I said slowly, keeping my tone level. "I'm just asking for an explanation." She stared back, her silence louder than words. Whatever was going to happen next, it was coming to a head, and I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me. Before I could say anything else, her radio crackled to life. A voice came through, low and urgent, but I couldn't make out the words. The officer pressed a hand to her earpiece, her expression shifting. Was that worry? Surprise? Whatever she heard, it changed something. She glanced at me, then down the street, where the police cruiser still sat, its engine idling. I could tell she was debating something, weighing her options. "Stay here," she said sharply, her tone leaving no room for argument. She turned and walked a few steps toward her car, speaking quietly into the radio. I could feel the tension shift, but I wasn't sure if it was getting better or worse. What was she talking about? Was there more to this than I realized? Then I saw it, a man walking briskly from the corner of the block, his face partially hidden by a baseball cap. He was looking at the officer, then at me, his pace quickening. The officer turned to face him, her body language suddenly defensive. I couldn't tell if she knew him or if this was someone else entirely, but whatever was happening, it felt like everything was spiraling out of control. This wasn't just about me anymore. Something bigger was unfolding, and I was right in the middle of it. The man approached quickly, his eyes darting between the officer and me. My heart skipped a beat when I saw his face. He was familiar. Too familiar. It was someone I hadn't seen in years. A former neighbor, someone who had disappeared without a trace after a series of odd events that never seemed fully explained. He left under strange circumstances, and now here he was, walking right toward me as if nothing had changed. The officer stepped forward to intercept him, and for a moment, I thought she might actually acknowledge the connection between them. But instead, she pulled her radio out again, her voice low as she spoke to someone on the other end. Whatever she was saying, it didn't sound good. The man glanced at me briefly, then gave a quick nod to the officer. It was like some unspoken understanding passed between them. I had no idea what it was, but I felt a chill creep up my spine. Then just as suddenly as the tension had built, the officer turned back to me. Her face softened, almost apologetic. "It's all a misunderstanding," she said, her words catching me off guard. "There was an issue with your address. We were looking for someone else." Before I could process what she meant, the man, who I now recognized as someone who had once been involved in shady dealings, slipped something into her hand. A small envelope. She glanced at it quickly, her eyes widening slightly. Whatever was inside, it wasn't something I was meant to see. The officer's demeanor shifted once again, and this time it was clear I wasn't getting the full story. She nodded at me curtly, then turned, walking away without another word. As she got into her cruiser, I realized that the whole situation was far from over. It had just taken a new, unexpected turn. I watched the car pull away, leaving me with more questions than answers, and the unsettling feeling that the real reason behind her visit was still out there, somewhere waiting to be uncovered. As the police cruiser disappeared down the street, I stood there, still processing everything that had happened. What had started as a simple, confusing encounter had spiraled into something much deeper, something I wasn't sure I fully understood. The officer's words had cleared the air, but her actions spoke louder than any explanation. That man, that envelope, whatever had transpired between them, I was certain it was only the surface of a much bigger story. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was now tangled in something far beyond me. What was this about? Why had I been involved? And what was in that envelope? The questions lingered unanswered, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going to forget this encounter anytime soon. Sometimes life throws us these curveballs, leaving us to pick up the pieces and make sense of it all. But for now, all I could do was wait and see where this strange story would lead next.